Everyone, myself Shweta Jha. I'm a BPT third year student. In this video, I will be teaching or guiding you about a particular anatomy topic. It's bones classification. So, what are the main things we have to deal in bones classification? What is the basic definition of a bone? What are the main function of bones? What are the classification of bones? On what basis they are classified? First one is the shape. Second one is structure. Third one is the ossification, and fourth one is the region. So in the ossification, it's a new word. What is it? It is defined as a procedure in which a bone is produced. It is known as bone formation. Then, what is the basic definition? How will we define a bone? Simply, it is defined as the specialized connective tissue. Its matrix is impregnated with the calcium salt, known as mainly hydroxyapatite. Its chemical formula is this. What's the main property of a bone? It is highly vascular and has a great regenerative power. There are total 206 bones in the adult. So what are the main basic functions of the bone? As we know that what the bone do, it provides shape or the structural framework to the body. So it forms a skeletal framework of a body and give shape to the body. तो क्या करता है इसमें? They just protect the vital organ, for example, our brain, heart and lungs. They store mineral salt and for example, calcium and the phosphorus. Simply, these are the sites of the blood cell production, for example, RBCs, WBCs, white blood cells and the red blood cells. These are the sites in which it is produced. So they provide surface for attachment of the muscles, thereby helping in the producing movement. Now coming to classification. See, the bones are classified on the basis of many things, on the basis of shape, on the basis of region, ossification and structure. But main is the shape. On the basis of shape, there are many: long bone, short bone, flat bone, irregular bone, pneumatic bone, sesamoid bone and the accessory bones. Then I will be explaining one by one. So what is it? It's the classification of the long bone. There are main three type of long bone. First one is the typical long bone. Second one is the miniature long bone. Third one is the modified long bone. In that typical long bone, what's the main property of this? There is nothing. If we are talking about a particular bone, for example, humerus. So there are main two end, upper end and the lower end. It is epiphysis. And there is a connecting shaft. And there is a connecting shaft which is known as the diaphysis. It is the epiphysis. This is the epiphysis. So now coming to the typical long bone. Their length exceeds the breadth. They are weight bearing. A long bone present a shaft. So these are the main clinical feature of a typical long bone. Then what are the main example of a typical long bone? As I discussed earlier, it's humerus, femur, radius, ulna, tibia and fibula. So as we know that fibula is the thinnest bone. Second one is the miniature long bone. What is the main function of it? Having one shaft only and one epiphysis. It means that there is one shaft only present and one epiphysis in the miniature long bone. Then now coming to the next one is the short bone. Short bone is what? Their shape is usually cuboid. They have a central marrow cavity which is surrounded by a spongy bone and a plate of a compact bone available. So what happens? They ossify in a cartilage. They ossify after birth. It means the ossification is being, it mainly ossifies in the cartilage. It mainly ossify after birth. It means that the ossification is being done after birth, except talus, calcaneus and the cuboid. Calcaneus is the heel bone. Cuboid where the ossification begins before birth. Normally ossification being after birth, but there are three exceptions are there: talus, calcaneus and the cuboid. Now coming to examples of a short bone. What are the main examples? It's carpals and tarsals. Now coming to flat bone. What happens in the flat bone? It consists of the two plates of a compact bone with the intervening spongy tissue. In small bones, it is known as diploe. What are the main example? As we know that in the flat bone, what happens? There is a vault of skull. For example, frontal lobe, parietal lobe and ribs and sternum. So the main examples are the ribs, sternum and the bones of the vault of skull. Now coming to the next part. So in that what happens? Now coming to irregular bones. In the irregular bones, there are irregular in shape. For example, the irregular one is the hip bone, vertebra, bones of base of skull, that is sphenoid, maxilla and the ethmoid. Maxilla is what? Upper jaw. Second one, the pneumatic bone. So what are the main properties of a pneumatic bone? These bones contains air-filled spaces. For example, the paranasal air sinuses that are lined by a mucous membrane. They are present around the nasal cavity. That's why paranasal sinus is present there. दे हेल्प इन एडिंग रेजोनेंस टू द वॉइस. ये क्या करता है, वॉइस में रेजोनेंस को ऐड करता है. सो इसके क्या मेन एग्जांपल्स होंगे, देयर विल बी मेनी एग्जांपल ऑफ न्यूमैटिक बोन, दैट इज मैक्सिला, स्फेनॉइड, ethmoid and frontal. Now coming to sigmoid bone. Main example, firstly I will give the example of a sigmoid bone. Main examples are the patella, pisiform and the fibula. So sigmoid bones are the bones that are embedded in the tendons. For example, patella in the tendon of quadriceps femoris. Quadriceps femoris muscle consists of 4 muscles. For example, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, rectus femoris. These are the main muscles, and vastus intermedius also. And pisiform in the tendon of flexor carpi ulnaris. Now coming to what are the main characteristic features of the sigmoid bone. So they develop in the tendon and ossify after birth. So the bone formation is being done after birth in the case of a sigmoid bone. So they are found where the tendons cross the end of long bones of limbs. They are not covered by any periosteum. There is no covering. So it is not covered by periosteum. They don't have Haversian canal or the system of that. Their surface that comes in contact with the bone is covered by the hyaline cartilage. So which cartilage is present, which it is covered by? It's the hyaline cartilage. Now coming to important note. What's the important note here? It minimizes friction. So friction is what? The rubbing will be very reduced in that part to alter the direction of a pull of muscle to maintain local circulation. Now coming to classification of bones according to structure. On the basis of structure, there are many type of bone: compact bone, membranous bone and the cartilaginous bone. The main one is the compact and the cancellous. Compact are the one which are dense in the structure like ivory. For example, shaft of the long bone, its main example. So next one is the cancellous bone. इसका main example क्या होगा? Simply these are what? Just the spongy and the trabecular system is present. For example, ends of the long bone. ये long bone के ends में present होता है. That is cancellous one. Now coming to on the basis of ossification. On the basis of ossification, there are what? It is divided into 3 main types: membranous, cartilaginous, membranocartilaginous. As the name indicate, membrane and cartilage. Partly it is divided in membrane and the partially it is divided into cartilage. Now I was discussing about the membranous one. So these are formed by the intramembranous ossification. They ossify in the mesenchymal condensation. For example, bones of vault of skull and the bones of faces. Now coming to the next one is the cartilaginous bone. Bones are formed by the endochondral ossification. Into that they ossify in cartilage. For example, bones of limb, humerus, femur, radius, ulna, fibula and tibia. So bones of base of skull, for example, vertebrae, ribs and sternum. Now coming to membranous cartilage. As I discussed, it is partially divided into membrane and cartilage. For example, mandible, its lower jaw, clavicle, which is a modified long bone, occipital, temporal and sphenoid. Now coming to regional classification. Then it is divided into axial and the appendicular. Axial, for example, bones of skull, vertebra, ribs, sternum. And it's bones of upper limb, scapula, humerus, ulna, carpals, metacarpal, phalanges and bones of lower limb. For example, what? It's femur, tibia, etc.